Welcome to the first ever episode of the What's New in Pharmacy podcast. Our inaugural guest for this series is fellow P3 student Holly Graber. Holly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Bob. I'm honored.
It's really a pleasure to have you here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background as it relates to pharmacy or anything else in your life?
Awesome. Yeah, so to start, I am actually the founder of the first women's club basketball team at the University of Pittsburgh. So I did that about 3 years ago now, and I'm also now a manager and partial practice player for the women's basketball team at Pitt. So I do a lot with basketball outside of pharmacy school, but within pharmacy school, I'm involved with Student Industry Organization, or SIO, and I'm the vice president of student experience. So I help to get speakers to come in and organize different events for the members of SIO. And in addition to that, which really sparked my interest in pharmacy, our pharmaceutical industry, is I had an internship this summer at Merck, and I was in global regulatory affairs and clinical safety, quality, and compliance, which is a mouthful, but generally I was working with all the departments within Merck to combat certain issues that they were having. So a lot of problem solving and a lot of working with regulatory and the safety side of the pharmaceutical industry.
Very cool, very cool. So it sounds like you're a real go-getter. You got a competitive internship at Merck doing all kinds of different stuff. As you said, it's a mouthful. I imagine your responsibilities were a mouthful as well. Can't really sum it up too easily on a resume or CV. Probably did a whole bunch of stuff. You started the first ever women's club basketball association at a D1 school with 18,000 other undergraduate students. So that is no light task that you've done.
Yeah, it was a lot of work that went into it, but couldn't be happy.
I imagine it was worth it. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on the pharmaceutical industry, and that kind of leads us into our topic today about the reputation of the pharmaceutical industry. What is their reputation currently, and why do you think, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so I think specifically in pharmacy schools, the road of industry is not really explained to people. We're very focused towards the clinical aspect of things with residencies or working in a community setting, but the pharmaceutical industry has so many roles for pharmacists that are just not, we don't know about them. There's no way to learn about them. So luckily through my internship and through SIO, I've been able to gain experience within the pharmaceutical industry and learn about all the opportunities that there are for pharmacists. And there are so many. You can be in marketing, you can be in regulatory affairs, clinical safety, you can do research and development, clinical trial, working with clinical trials there, and so many more. There's so many different routes to go through in the pharmaceutical industry for pharmacists, and it's just not talked about because I think from my experience at school and even just out in the community, the pharmaceutical industry has a bad rep for being just only focused on money. And that's not true. Yes, they're a very successful business model and they generate a lot of revenue, but they're in it because they want to help people. And they're in it because there are people out there with conditions that can't be treated just with the current medication that we have. So there's so much money and so much effort and so much manpower that goes into developing a new medication, and it's not for the money. The money is not the main thing in mind. It's always the patient focus. And I think that's why the pharmaceutical industry gets a bad rep. And I think that through SIO specifically, that's what we want to try to tell people, is that it's for the patient, and that's why pharmacists come into play with it.
So let's take a moment to just draw a little bridge here. Mm-hmm. So on this side, we have the sort of bad reputation that the public misconceives about the drug industry. And then on this side, we have a pharmacy school education where I'm not too sure how much exposure we really have to industry in our curriculum itself. We have our drug development class. Do you think perhaps the lack of education about direct industry, pharmaceutical industry processes kind of perpetuates the public conception of the pharmaceutical industry and the reputation?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that everyone has this preconceived notion that the pharmaceutical industry is this big black sheep that no one wants to talk about. And that's not how it is. It's a great career, and you use your pharmacy knowledge really more than I think I ever had in any other position that I've had. And specifically our drug development class, if I didn't have that class going into Merck, I would have been so far behind everyone else. I learned so much from that class about all the aspects of the industry and all the roles that pharmacists can really have in it. And I think that's where we lack in pharmacy education in general. And it's not just Pitt, it's a career like issue. I don't think it's really exposed in many pharmacy schools. And the ones that are exposed to it, such as Rutgers with their fellowship program, they have such a leg up on everyone else who focuses only on clinical stuff. And I just think that's somewhere that pharmacy schools in general really need to push towards, because like the industry will always be there. There will always be developing new medications. And that's something that needs to be focused on.
I agree completely. So let's talk a minute about SIO. For our viewers who may not be familiar with SIO, SIO stands for the Student Industry Organization, and you are the president?
I'm the vice president
Vice president of SIO here at Pitt.
Student experience. So,
yeah. Yes. Fancy. So let's talk about the evolution of SIO here at Pitt, because I know that when we started here at Pitt, there was no such thing as the Pitt Pharmacy Investment Portfolio. That was just, it wasn't a pipe dream, but it was still in the planning phases, and now this is a legitimate ongoing process. Talk to us for a minute about the different evolutions of SIO and things that have occurred while you've been here at Pitt.
Yeah, so SIO was started, I think about 5 years ago. I don't remember the exact amount of years, but it was started by a group of students who were interested in the industry and knew that the curriculum that we follow doesn't give exposure to it. So what we do through SIO is try to educate people on the roles and opportunities for pharmacists in the industry. And through that, we have different speakers come in. We've had 3 fellows come in from different fellowship programs around the United States just to talk about their program, how they got into it. And we also are having a CV and interview workshop specifically geared towards the industry and how you can mold yourself and mold your CV to be a person that can work in the industry. So SIO is really focused on education, and Mackenzie McNogue is the president of SIO, and she does an amazing job incorporating her knowledge and her experience with what the students really want to get out of it. And Pitt Investment Portfolio is run by Corey Rance, and he's also part of SIO. So we kind of work together with stuff like that. And he's done a great job just gaining exposure for students into the pipeline of the drugs that are coming out in the industry, which we, again, don't have exposure to or really know how to, get that information. But it's been a great opportunity to work with both Corey and Mackenzie, just kind of combining all of our knowledge that we have in the pharmaceutical industry. And it's been great.
Very cool. So, to elaborate a little bit more on SIO as well, so a lot of the organizations we have here at Pitt, APHA, ASHP, I think a lot of them are more patient focused, and they have a lot of activities outside the school that are really patient focused. Immunization education, drug take back days, heart health education, going into high schools, and etc. But SIO seems a little bit different because it's almost preparing young professionals for their own career. So if you had to rank organizations, particularly SIO, based on how much they actually teach you compared to other organizations, where do you think you would put SIO, just based on your conception?
I think I put SIO pretty far up because a lot of the other organizations do incredible jobs, but they kind of reiterate concepts that we already learn in our normal curriculum, while SIO brings a completely different viewpoint into pharmacy and the different roles within it that we are not exposed to within the curriculum. So I think that's our main focus, is we want to educate people on the opportunities that are there. And specifically, you mentioned going out in the community and stuff. So what we wanted to do for this year's Dean's Theme with Generation RX. So I'm the representative for SIO for Generation RX, and we partnered with PPIP to create a concept where we're going to go into a pharmaceutical company and do a drug take-back day specifically in the company. So that gets people in SIO their foot kind of in the door, and really to see what the industry is like and meet people, make those connections and develop their network. And we were actually fortunate enough to be chosen as the People's Choice Award winner at the leadership retreat, the fall leadership retreat earlier in October. So I think even just that is just really shows how we're just focusing on educating people. Like, no one knew that you could go into an industry and you can do this and you can gain this exposure to an industry through something just as simple as a drug take back day. So I definitely would rank us pretty high on the education portion.
Yeah, very cool. So let's steer our conversation a little bit more back towards the industry. So we've established that the public has this misconception about drug companies, that they're these greedy corporate entities that are just out there to make a crap load of money. They are very profitable entities, as you said, but let's talk more about the good things that come out of drug companies. Even throwing it back to the 90s, diabetes treatment. You had insulin and you had metformin. You didn't really have many other options, and nowadays you have, I can name a lot of the diabetes medications, but obviously there are too many to count on 2 hands and 2 feet. So what other positives have drug companies brought to patients?
Yeah, so I think, mainly what we should focus on is the accessibility to healthcare opportunities that the industry has brought. The more drugs that are created, the more unique medications that are created that allows more options for each individual person and each individual condition. No patient is the same. And that's really where the pharmaceutical industry comes in, is because they're always developing to help more people. And I think that's not really what's recognized. Yeah, the medications are going to be expensive because they put billions of dollars into creating this medication. That wouldn't be a sustainable business if they didn't charge money for it. And I just looking at Merck specifically, the vaccines that they have coming out, even in the pipeline, and Gardasil specifically, is groundbreaking. We've never had a vaccine for cancer prevention before. So that itself is incredible. And not only the medications that are more popularly known, but other, background medications. So ivermectin for river blindness, Merck has done an amazing job with donating that to places affected by river blindness, and no profit whatsoever from it. They're just donating because they know that there's this population that needs this medication. And that's never what's focused on when the industry is brought up. It's only brought about the profit, and that's just not the case. And again, that's where SIO comes in, just try to educate people on all the great roles that the industry plays.
Right. And, going back to, these are expensive drugs sometimes. Manufacturers actually offer manufacturer coupons for eligible patients. Do you have any experience even within that department? You've directly seen them contribute to some sort of fund. Would you be able to speak about that experience at all?
Yeah, so specifically at Merck, I didn't really do any work with that, but I work at an independent pharmacy, Wilson's Pharmacy in Lawrenceville in Pittsburgh, and we see patients come in needing these, specific and more uncommonly used drugs. And as a pharmacist, that's another way that a pharmacist comes in, because knowing, GoodRx and all the other manufacturers' coupons that are accessible out there, that's where a pharmacist comes in to really access them. So people who, patients that they just see the price and they don't know that there's other things that can be done about it. And that's where the pharmacists come in, both within the industry and in a community setting, is they're aware of these different opportunities and can help patients really get the medications that they need for an affordable price.
Yeah, so right after I went into pharmacy school, I could actually speak personally about this. My mother was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and first line options after methotrexate and prednisone, because those weren't working obviously, were monoclonal antibodies, specifically Humira. And she went into the doctor. She said, "Here's a prescription. It's going to be $3,000 a month." And she said, "Well, hold on." Had she not had a son that worked in a pharmacy, I don't think she would have looked towards the manufacturer coupons. So even just being able to educate people, hey, these resources exist. It's just so wonderful that companies even make that available.
And I think that's part of the lack of education that we have in school specifically, is that some people don't even know that these coupons exist. And they don't really see the generous side of the industry. They just see, their preconceived notion of it. And that's where the lack of education is.
So if you had to think of one individual when you hear pharmaceutical industry, who do you think of?
So being someone from Merck, I do think of Ken Frazier. He is the CEO of Merck, and he has made leaps and bounds in the industry and turning Merck specifically for people to view it as a patient-centered company. And from being, and I'm biased because I worked there, but even just being around the area where Merck is, you really see the impact that it makes on patients' lives and how focused we are on, Merck for Mothers was like a huge initiative that he helped create, and as I mentioned, the ivermectin for river blindness. He does such great things, and I think through his stay so far as CEO, he has really reinvented the view of pharmaceutical industry.
Hey, it is absolutely okay to have pride with where you work. That's part of the key of having a happy life, right?
Yes, definitely.
Do you want to stay at Merck after you graduate?
I would love to stay at Merck after I graduate, yes.
So you must have had a fun internship.
I did. I learned more than I ever have in my life. And in a 3-month period, I learned more than I can even say.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So either in your internship or in pharmacy school, is there anybody you would identify as a mentor to your experiences, and just elaborate on what they do, who they are, and why you connect with them so well?
Yeah, so a lot of the professors and staff in the pharmacy school are very clinical focused, but I really have connected with one professor in particular, Dr. Karen Pater. Even though she's very clinical focused, she is always looking towards the individual and what you want to develop as and what you want to become. I was lucky enough to work really closely with her in the Achieving Independence competition through Pennsylvania Pharmacists Association, or PPA. And it was a competition in which we developed a community pharmacy model that's sustainable and can sustain all the changes that are going on around us. And she was incredible in it. I learned so much from her and so much from the experience, and we ended up winning, which is always a benefit.
Yes.
But I think she's been super pivotal in me just knowing and being comfortable with what I want to do, even though it's not the traditional route.
Very cool. I love Dr. Pater.
Yes.
She's so passionate. Like when we had self-care with her, I could just see it was coming from a place that she loves her patients.
Yes.
She wants to help.
Yes. And I think that's what we connected most over, is we both always want the patient first. Even though we're in different areas, we're always looking towards the patient first. And I think that's where a pharmacist specifically can come into the industry, because they're always geared towards the patient.
I'm so glad you ended with that note, because let's talk a little bit about pharmacists coming into the industry. What roles can pharmacists serve in a pharmaceutical corporation? A lot of people think, it's just a bunch of organic chemists throwing together compounds and then doctors supervising clinical trials. But where do pharmacists fit into that?
There are so many different places that a pharmacist can fit in, which I don't even know them all now. And being even associated with SIO and Merck, there are pharmacists who have created their own paths in the industry. I met pharmacists who work in marketing. You never think that a pharmacist could be in marketing, developing, the content that patients actually physically see. MSLs, medical science liaisons, who go around and educate different, healthcare providers about the medications coming out. You never think you could be part of a sales team as a pharmacist. Working with safety and pharmacovigilance, which is what I'm very interested in, is monitoring post-marketing release side effects. So making sure that Merck is, and I keep saying Merck, but all industries in general are up to date with, if there's another adverse event that was found when it was released into the public rather than found in the clinical trial. And then you have the regulatory affairs people that work closely with the FDA getting medications approved. And you have clinical development teams who work with the clinical trials directly with PhDs and organic chemistry chemists and stuff that you mentioned. But there are pharmacists on the team, because they can really bring that patient-centered view and really a full understanding of the medication.
So it sounds like pharmacists can fit as a lot of different cogs working together as part of a well-oiled machine to provide patient-centered. Well, I think that about wraps up. Unless you have, maybe one piece of closing advice you would want to give to anybody seeking out more information about industry pharmacy.
Yeah, my advice would be don't close industry off as an option. Most people don't know all the opportunities that are available to it, and if you look into it, you might find something that fits perfectly for you. And even if it's not industry, no matter what it is, make sure that the job that you have you love. And specifically, this summer I woke up every day and I wanted to go to work. And I always made fun of people when they said that, like, oh, who wants to actually go to work? But I did. I genuinely did. So just work, whatever it is, whether it's industry, clinical, in the community, make sure you love it and just work towards that.
Thank you so much for that advice. Thank you so much for being my first guest on this podcast series. You did a wonderful job. I'm so grateful.
Thank you for having me, Bob. This was great.
Thank you. And we will see you all next time.